Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis.
Hey, welcome to the show, Leadership is Changing. What we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Leaders everywhere confront similar obstacles because people are people, but everywhere you go, leaders are overwhelmed, disrupted, and under pressure. They run from email to email, meeting to meeting. Many leaders are not changing quick enough, which means they run the risk of becoming irrelevant and being left behind. The purpose of the show is taking our listeners' leadership to another level by finding their balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. I believe we don't have enough effective leaders in the world today, and if we can get the leaders to step up and lead change, then they can inspire real change. Hey listeners, it's now time to adapt in our fast-moving world, and I want to welcome you to today's episode. Listeners, if you haven't been to our Facebook group or our LinkedIn page, come along and join those two different platforms. We'd love to see you there. So it's the Facebook group and the LinkedIn page called Leadership is Changing. All right, I have a mashup for you today with three wonderful guests. From episode 79, Greg Rice. He's the podcast host of The Art of Communication. From episode 98, Joanna Makris. She's the inspired 360-degree success speaker, trainer, and coach. And from episode 100, Nthiga. He is the president and founder of the Business Implementation Academy. Now, listeners, you'll hear some wonderful insights and thoughts being shared by all these three different guests. I'm going to encourage you to take notes. I'm going to encourage you to visit the main episodes of these three guests because they are very wonderful people who are sharing fantastic insights that will help you with the voice of impact as a leader. All right, team, sit back and enjoy the mashup. So, Greg, you may have several people, but who's your favorite leader and why? Now, this person could be alive or from history. So, who's your favorite leader and why?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And my leader is probably somebody who you've gotten before, but I'm going to go with Abraham Lincoln. Obviously, led us through the Civil War, a really difficult time, right? Gave his life for it. But beyond that, he filled his cabinet with people who had highly dissenting opinions, right? He filled it with political enemies in a way and created a lot of debate and found the middle ground there. He was open to other people's opinions, and I love that. He also never gave up, right? Despite having magnificent failures throughout his life, he never gave up. He always kept trying and trying that next step. So he's a great example from that perspective. And then I also love how he was always able to diffuse any situation with humor and compassion, right? He was just very witty and very compassionate and was always able to calm down a really difficult situation. So I love reading about him and emulating him as much as I can.
Yeah, and that compassion and the human side of it, it's really important nowadays. And I don't know about you, but I'm seeing a lot more and more of it being expected by people from in the world, right?
Absolutely. I think it goes. I think there's two sides to that coin, and from one hand, it's being expected more and more, maybe within the workplace, right, or from our leaders or the people we have relationships with. On the other hand, though, I think we're becoming less compassionate and empathetic with people who disagree with us and have different views than us, and I think we're becoming increasingly polarized in that regard, and that's a scary thing, and that's something that hopefully a little bit of what I'm doing can help with that, right? If I dream of one day being able to set up in-person meetings with groups of folks who are all about learning about other people and are open to and have skills around communicating effectively.
Yes.
Or even, creating an app to bring people together to have conversations about things that they might disagree about, while also they have lots of things in common, right? So they build on things they have in common, and then they talk about the one thing they disagree about. I think we need to learn to listen to each other a little bit more.
Tremendous. Yep. And listening is fantastic. And that goes just beautifully in the way of the art of communication that your podcast is talking about as well, for sure. Hey, tell me, so I'm going to ask you a question here. Now, this can be somebody who's alive or from history. So who's your favorite leader and why?
Okay, now, there's so many great leaders, right? And I'm sure that most people tell you that they struggle to find one name and tell you who that is. Same as for me, but for me, it's a totally different approach. For me, it's not about a name. It's rather a type of person. For me, it's everyday people, the next door leaders, as I say. It could be someone in an office, a shop, a mom, a teenager, a CEO. Actually, anyone who brings inspiration and transformation, who serves, unites, values, and models for others. These are my favorite ones. So these are the ones that create positive change and positive impact in our world. And it's a type of person. It's not one name.
Yeah, excellent. A type of person. I like what you said, the next door leader. Yeah, I love that terminology. I don't know about you, Joanna, but I actually feel like wanting to break out and speak to you in Greek. But of course, our listeners are all around the world, so we're having to stay here with English and that. But so Joanna is also known as Joanna, is the name in Greek as well. So so Joanna, I love what you just shared about. It's not an actual name, but it's the type of person. And it's the becoming a leader of that type of person, which I think is really quite important. Because as you said earlier on, that you can be one person at work and one person at home, where it should be the same person, but also you need to be authentic. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're sharing there is about the next door leader is somebody who is being authentic as well, which is wonderful. Yeah, it's fantastic. So the question I've got for you now, and I don't know whether who it's going to be. Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
Oh, wow. There are different leaders. I think right now, for me, when I look at in the realm of leadership, I have to say John Maxwell right now. One, because not only have I had an opportunity to see his impact, but I've also had an opportunity to see him evolve. You know, being a part of the John Maxwell team as founder members, but just being in that whole part of him coming from just understanding, self-leadership to team leadership and understanding success, and then seeing significance where he's now impacting worlds and countries. That for me is why I pick him. And why I pick him is because that's practical leadership. A lot of people talk about leadership and positional, and in a world where today we are, I don't even know whether to call it deficit. I mean, we are anemic to leaders and leadership. We are at a place where we've glorified the worst of leadership. It is so refreshing to see somebody like him who's leading people. And I think, leadership is nothing, as he's taught us, leadership is influence. And watching him, seeing the impact that he's had in the global world excites me. In the world of business, I think Elon Musk is pretty interesting. I like people who are unconventional. I like people who are willing to put their stake in the ground and try something that has never been tried. And like him or not, somebody said it to me, like me or hate me, there's no money in between, right?
Yeah.
So, but I like the fact that here was a guy who was willing to go into a world and change the direction on how we look at climate today and look at how we're looking at energy. So there are probably two people that I really admire.
Yeah, and I agree with you about both of them. And, with John as well, is just to see him, how it's almost like he just cuts the noise out of what's going on around the world. And he's in there to do, as you said, the practical leadership stuff and teach people what they need to do as leaders to get on with it rather than, doing things and getting stuck in the weeds, if I can put it that way.
That's true. And here's what I think, and I love what you just said, that he cuts the noise out. I think you cut the noise out when you're a leader who's on a mission.
Yeah, sure.
There's no doubt that when you're in his presence, you do understand that he is on a mission. He's out to achieve something. So if it doesn't fit in, then it falls out.
Yep.
And I love that you point that out.
And I think that even if you think about your story as well, where you just said before, there was no way of going back, no way of going back to that comfort zone, right? So that was also cutting that noise out and knowing there was no way to turn back. So if you can cut the noise out and you're on a mission, and I know you still are on a mission, then you're just going to keep going forward, which is what Elon Musk is doing too, right? I mean, he's on a mission, and really important stuff for sure.
And I got to say this, when we think of leadership, and you know that when it took me 9 years to have an opportunity to actually learn from John. And the day he opened the John Maxwell team, I only had $1,000 between me and anything. And it was $5,000 to get in. Yep. I called and begged my way through, and they allowed me. I was the only person who joined it on a payment plan. Now, when you tell me, when we went to the first event, when we went to the founders event, if I had lost $1, Denis, I would not have gone back home. I could only afford one meal. When we went out for breaks, I would walk out. It was in West Palm then. I would walk out and go to the next 2 other hotels because my stomach was rumbling in how hungry I was. But there was no going back. Now, when you tell me later on that I have shared the stage with this guy numerous times, I have had an opportunity to be mentored by this guy. I've had an opportunity to introduce him on stage numerous times. You want to tell me that dreams are not possible?
Yeah.
When you make up your mind, when you cut out the noise, when you say there is no going back, anything is possible. It doesn't matter. My story could be different. Everybody else is dealing with something different, and it doesn't have to be that here's what I know. I had to cross continents to believe in that. Most of us have to cross the continents between their 2 years.
Yep. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It. Yep. Oh, that's wonderful. And listeners, what's holding you back, listeners? I mean, just think about it. And Njeru is just sharing this wonderful story here and how he's gone on that journey then to meet with John Maxwell. John Maxwell, a beautiful speaker, great author, and a wonderful man. And just being able to hear him go through the journey. And I was there with him, with Njeru and John Maxwell at that first founders meeting. And you're there in your own little bubble, if I can put it that way, at that event and things like that. And you think about, certain things, but there's other people who are there, who are going through more, who actually gone ahead and actually what's the word I wanted to use? So not sort of the striving, everyone's striving for the same thing, but for others, they've paid a bigger price. And they're still paying a bigger price. I'm not sure the word that I'm looking for there, but
I think here's what you're trying to say, Denis. Everybody got to pay a price.
Yep.
It just varies, right? For some people but everybody's got to pay a price. And I think the lesson behind this is, if you want to be your best, if you want to have the impact that you want, if you want to live a life that is meaningful, if you want to look back and say, hey, you know what? I left it all. You got to pay a price.
Yep.
I mean, think about this. It's been almost 8-9 years
yes.
that we got to meet at this particular event, and you want to know the beauty about it. Some things for me is the quality of the life. I get to meet you, Denis.
Yeah.
I get to have this conversation with you years later, and this is what's very interesting, listeners. I may not speak to you every other day, but every time I speak to you, it sounds like it was yesterday.
Oh, I agree. Me too. Exactly like that. So and I know that even when we're messaging each other, we call each other brother. And
and I mean it from the bottom of my heart.
Me too. And it's like, if we're in somewhere and something is in trouble, you're in trouble, I'm there. It's just the way it is. And that's just a beautiful thing to see. So cut the noise out, especially when you tend to cut the noise out when you're on a mission team. And listeners, what mission are you on today? And what can you do today? And what are you, I wouldn't say sacrifice, but what price are you willing to go and pay to go ahead and do that? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about what are you willing to go and step up to do, go and chase that dream that you want and get underway. Yes, your coffee may not be warm enough or hot enough today. I get all that. But it comes down to the fact, how big is your why? How big is your dream? And it's really important. Wow, listeners, how big is your why and how big is your dream? As I said just then with Njeru, that is really, really important. And it's amazing what his story was and what he shared there with us in that mashup. So team, if you haven't already checked out episode 79 by Greg Rice, episode 98 by Joanna Makris, and also episode 100 by Nthiga, then I would encourage you to go out and check those episodes. They are wonderful. Even if you've heard them before, go back and revisit them because there are some wonderful learnings, insights, observations, teachings that you can take away from each one of those episodes for sure. Listeners, if you haven't already checked out the Facebook group or the LinkedIn page, go ahead and check that. Every now and then I do a Facebook Live and a LinkedIn Live directly into that group and directly into that page. And if you're a member of those different platforms, of those different tribes, then you're going to be able to get the access to those videos and where I'm sharing information and so forth about leadership is changing. What I'm going to encourage you to do is share this episode with 3 other people and also this whole podcast. So we'd love you to go ahead and share this podcast with your friends, your family, and your network. Hey, listeners, what we as leaders know to be true is that change is constant. Change is incredibly scary, especially with the unknown and unfamiliar territory. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing. Hey, look out for the episodes as they're being released. Download them, have a listen, put a review, and a rating. As I said before, share them with your friends, your family, your network. And if there's any feedback you'd like to give me about the show, or if you have a question for my guests on when I'm interviewing them, or if you have a question for the Ask Denis Freestyle episode, then feel free to send me an email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com. Hey, listeners, it's always a pleasure to being with you. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.